Thanks for taking time to learn how artists who use machine learning in their creative practice theorize the uses and impacts of text-to-image generative AI. Drawing on a reflexive thematic analysis of data collected from a workshop with 15 artists from 10 countries, our research identified three high-level sets of folk theories related to using text-to-image models in creative practice, their potential harms, and harm reduction strategies. We demonstrate how these overlapping folk theories inform each other and highlight the value of the folk theory lens to inform responsible AI practice. If you've been following the generative AI news cycle over the past few years, you might have heard about its use in creative communities and industries. Contemporary art scenes have seen new movements that incorporate the practice of machine learning, permeating art worlds related to producing, presenting, promoting, and buying art. However, alongside expansion of these new art worlds is public concern related to the data used to train models, global considerations over copyright, artist compensation, the automation of creative knowledge work, and job displacement within creative economies. Underlying these concerns are critiques of how creative ML, including text-to-image tools, might function as technologies of creative and economic control by chilling cultural production and homogenizing art through style mimicry. Moreover, against this backdrop are increasing social and regulatory expectations that machine learning models and products will be developed safely and responsibly, which requires understanding how technologies are used in a particular social context. Examining how machine learning artists experience text-to-image models can enrich understanding of the systems of thought underpinning their uses in creative practice and locate intervention points to inform responsible AI research and practice. One approach to understanding artist systems of thought is through the lens of algorithmic folk theories, which reflect the everyday understandings people draw on to explain, interpret, and intervene in socio-technical systems. Folk theories are often shared by a social group and are acquired from people's everyday experience or social interaction with technologies. As such, folk theories are a malleable way that users of algorithmic systems make sense of a technology in relation to broader social dynamics. Importantly, differently situated communities may hold complex, multi-part folk theories that are dynamically shaped by their experiences, their goals in a particular social context, and their prior use of an algorithmic system. It's important to understand a user community's folk theories because they shape both how they understand and interact with the technology and their perspectives towards developer practices. Attention to the folk theorization of machine learning artists as one distinct user community offers researchers and practitioners rich insight to understand how they situate creative machine learning in their lives in alignment with their algorithmic awareness, motivations, and imaginaries. This kind of rich insight and reflexive community engagement can help proactively bridge gaps between developer expectations and how different artist communities actually use and experience technologies. While prior work examines the politics and practices of machine learning artists, limited work engages this community on socio-technical harms from text-to-image tools and their rationales towards reducing those harms. To begin to address this gap, we conducted a qualitative study with 15 global machine learning artists, uncovering their folk theories related to T2I mediated creativity. Our research focused on three main questions. How do artists use text-to-image models and frame creativity with respect to them? What are artists' perspectives towards types and drivers of harms from using text-to-image models? And what are their perspectives towards harm reduction efforts? We recruited 15 artists from 10 countries who had previously used text-to-image models in their practice and engaged them in 3 interactive workshops around their situated expertise and experience. We chose participatory workshops as a method, as this allowed us to elicit contextual information about their practice, values, and experiences, surface rich community-specific insights, and identify views towards minimizing harms and who's responsible for addressing them. We use reflexive thematic analysis to analyze artists' verbal and written responses to workshop activities. The contributions we offer the community include an empirical account of how cross-cultural artists understand T2I mediated creativity, an analysis of their folk theories across dimensions of use, harm, and harm reduction, and a discussion of how examining folk theories across these three dimensions can reveal how communities frame socio-technical problems and solutions, which can inform responsible AI research and practice. So now, the artist folk theories. Our reflexive thematic analysis identified three major types of folk theories about T2I models in creative practice. Their folk theories of use reflect their ideas about how they employ these technologies and the broader implications of these technologies on creativity. Their folk theories of harm reflect their beliefs about how T2I models are both a target and source of socio-technical harm. And lastly, their folk theories of harm reduction reflect their beliefs about how to improve model governance and redistribute responsibility for governing models. Examining folk theories across these three dimensions illuminates how ML artist communities frame socio-technical problems and solutions. Next, I'll briefly discuss each folk theory. First, ML artists express 4 different folk theories focused on 2 dimensions of use. The first dimension focuses on the divergent ways artists employ T2I models in creative practice. This includes their belief that T2I models are a creative medium with specific information-rich properties that can be crafted and molded. For example, participant 5 from the UK reflected, "I approach it as what's the concept I want to create and what medium or way of producing is most suitable for what I want to talk about." In contrast, they also frame T2I models as a mundane tool, useful for prototyping and collaborator communication. Here they position T2I models as a mechanical means of facilitating creative processes without employing generated outputs in the final piece. The artist expressed how employing models in this way facilitates or eases cumbersome aspects of the creative process, especially in early conceptual stages and to mock-up prototypes. For example, participant 8 from India reflected how he felt that in early stages of collaborative work, T2I models are a way to avoid the lost in translation scenarios, where collaborators have different understandings of the creative concept. The second dimension of use, evident in their folk theories, focuses on the implications of T2I-mediated creativity. Here the artists emphasized that while T2I tools increase access to creative modalities, true creativity requires rising above basic model affordances. For example, participant 10 described how it's necessary for artists to reflect on what are you actually bringing that's a more inventive take on the medium than just the output. Overall, these 4 overlapping folk theories of use underscore how the ways in which ML artists make sense of T2I models are contextualized by the motivations, perspectives, and goals of the person using the tool in a particular context. We invite you to read our paper for more examples of artists' folk theories of use. Next, the ML artists in our study express 3 folk theories reflecting 2 dimensions of harm, stemming from the use of T2I models in creative practice. This includes how T2I models are both a target and source of socio-technical harm. In terms of their beliefs about how T2I models are a target of harm, they emphasized how models are harmed by engineering efforts to eliminate failures, bugs, and glitches, and product policy efforts to limit functionality and implement safety guardrails. In terms of eliminating failures, bugs, and glitches, participant 5 from the UK described how perfecting models leads to a sterilization of the technology, rendering it too commercial, so it loses the potential excitement it holds for some creative work. It's worthwhile to note that these first 2 folk theories of harm sit in direct tension with common technology developer practices, in which much work of engineers is focused on polishing and perfecting products, and the work of responsible AI practitioners is focused on minimizing socio-technical harms and launching safe products through technical and non-technical mitigations. Discussing how T2I models can be a source of harm, the ML artists emphasize that harms are not deterministic, but contextual and distributed unequally across contexts. For example, participant 6 from Poland described how in the context of filmmaking, T2I tools may disproportionately result in opportunity loss for below-the-line talent, referring to the crew involved in the pre-production, production, and post-production phases. In this and other examples of this particular folk theory of harm, the artist desired greater specificity when different stakeholders discussed harms from creative machine learning tools. And the ML artists' folk theories of harm reduction reflected their beliefs about how to improve model governance and redistribute responsibility for governing models. These folk theories underscore their concern about protecting T2I models, in which they articulated transparency in model development can both enable creative practice and educate about appropriate model uses, and that expanding artist control over T2I models reduces harms to creative practice by protecting them as a medium. For example, participant 7 described how he wants to be able to turn off all control parameters or have them turned on, so whatever is in the raw can come out, because getting direct contact between creative thinking and AI is where some really good stuff is going to happen. Then, in terms of responsibility for mitigating harms, ML artists emphasize that responsibility for doing harm reduction should be distributed between the artist, model developers, moderators, and distributors of the platform. They problematized how it felt that responsibility for reducing harm was primarily allocated to developers. For example, participant 15 described how there's both commercial and non-commercial entities working in this area, and we need to make sure that continues to exist and that harm reduction efforts do not become a purely commercial area with purely commercial goals. Now that we've briefly described the different folk theories, we want to discuss the kinds of relationships we identified between them. Our analysis surfaced how examining folk theories across dimensions of use, harm, and harm reduction illuminates relational patterns, with theories of use shaping beliefs about harm and harm reduction. This reveals how folk theories about different aspects of algorithmic systems are interlinked, with beliefs about technology use forming a base point for beliefs about harm and harm reduction. One of the folk theories of use we identified is that T2I models are an artistic medium. The ways that these artists orient to T2I models as a medium to be molded through their creative practice informs their perceptions of harm and harm reduction. While they recognize that T2I models that are used in power-laden creative industries and art worlds can produce harmful social impacts, they simultaneously perceive models as a medium that is harmed by engineering efforts to perfect bugs and glitches, as well as responsible AI mitigations, such as safety classifiers and block lists. While the ML artists in this study recognize the necessity of these interventions if models are employed outside of critical art context or used by general audiences, they reduce the viability of models for their creative work. Similarly, their theory of T2I models as a medium informs their desire for harm reduction efforts of expanding artist control over model parameters. In this example, understanding folk theories of use contextualize beliefs about harm and harm reduction. To conclude, here are a few takeaways about how the folk theory lens can support responsible AI practice and research. First, the folk theory lens can help examine situated attitudes about novel or existing technologies. We argue that focusing specifically on theories of use, harm, and harm reduction provides a framework to understand the deeper relationships between these dimensions. As folk theories are socially situated, researchers can examine the theories held by different communities to identify commonalities and distinctions. And lastly, researchers should contextualize the folk theories held by different communities within the broader policy and regulatory landscape to guide development of technologies with equity as a North Star. Thank you for listening to our presentation, and we invite you to read our full paper. Thank you.